I knocked on my husband's study door 13 times, seeking an audience with Matthew Whitmore after father was falsely accused of examination fraud. Not once did he grant me a meeting. The first time, he was away collecting his childhood sweetheart's belongings, bringing her to the capital because of some quarrel with her husband. The second time, sweet Eleanor was suffering from the unfamiliar climate, and he was too busy finding physicians and brewing medicinal teas to hear even a single sentence from me. And so it continued, until father was sentenced to exile in the southern province of Meizhou, with departure set for 3 days hence. Only then did Matthew finally consent to see me. "Your father's case cannot be overturned," he said with cool detachment. "Further deliberation serves no purpose. My only concern is for Eleanor. She is new to the capital and knows no one. Perhaps you could spend time with her, keep her company." So father's very survival was but a trifling matter to him. Further deliberation served no purpose. I calmly presented him with a divorce document. "No need," I said quietly. "Let us divorce instead." Matthew barely glanced at the papers before taking them and tearing them to pieces, scattering the fragments like autumn leaves. "Are you testing me, Margaret?" His voice carried a note of incredulity. "Your father's troubles are unfortunate, but I have no intention of abandoning you when you need support most, nor will I agree to divorce you." I looked up at my husband, my heart constricting with a familiar ache. He knew everything about the failed candidates blocking my carriage to accuse father of fraud, about my desperate attempts these past weeks to save father's reputation, about my 13 futile visits to see him, the Deputy Minister of Justice. He knew how this grieved me, knew I would harbor resentment, yet still, he chose to remain aloof. I swallowed my tears. "This is not a test." Matthew sighed, seeing the moisture gathering in my eyes, yet he pressed his fingers to his own temples instead of comforting me. "Is this about Eleanor? These years have been difficult for her," he continued. "After her father's death, she married poorly with no one to protect her. You've always known your parents' love. You cannot understand such hardship. Eleanor and I grew up together under her father's care and guidance. I cannot simply abandon her now." His voice deepened, each word deliberate. "I ask only this one thing of you." Matthew was a man of rigid principles. When he first entered the Hanlon Academy, he offended a senior minister's son and spent 6 months copying documents in obscurity. Never once had he asked anything of me or my father. Yet now, for a country girl from his past, he was asking me to befriend her. I shook my head. With father's exile approaching, there are countless preparations. I have no inclination for social calls. Matthew seemed about to speak again, but fell silent. He stepped forward, raising his hand to wipe away my tears. I turned my face away. His fingers froze mid-air before curling into a loose fist, his voice softening further. "I'll accompany you to see your father off when the time comes. Exile is merely temporary. Many have weathered such storms and returned to favor. Do not distress yourself unnecessarily." I stared at him, my lips trembling as I struggled to find words. Merely temporary. Meizhou was a plague-ridden wilderness where men went to die. What did others' political fortunes matter to me? I had only one father. Matthew failed to notice my distress. Concerned for Eleanor, he had come in haste and departed the same way, leaving me with nothing but his retreating figure. At least there would be no "when the time comes" between us ever again. I hadn't deceived Matthew. I truly was busy preparing for father's departure. The divorce, too, was real. Me first priority was cataloging my dowry for sale. Father needed funds for basic necessities in prison, and the journey to Meizhou would require considerable travel expenses. From early morning, I worked tirelessly, checking inventories, assessing quality, deciding what to keep and what to pawn. Should I accept promissory notes or silver pieces? How much should I insist upon? Servants bustled in and out with identification tokens. At this crucial moment, Eleanor arrived. She brought a plate of crisp sugar candies, claiming they were specialties from Songjiang Prefecture that Matthew particularly favored. She had made them herself and wanted me to try some. I had no time for such frivolities. I dislike sweets, I said curtly. Please return home. Eleanor's eyes immediately brimmed with tears. Her long lashes fluttered, and even the small mole on her nose seemed to quiver as though she'd suffered some tremendous injustice. Brother Matthew said if I felt lonely, I could visit you for conversation. Do you dislike me so? Yes, I replied, my heart strangely calm, devoid even of disappointment. The things that mattered to me never seemed to register with him. Eleanor looked wounded. Margaret, I ignored her as servants brought in my coral tree, the most precious item in my trousseau. Father had once joked that if Matthew ever mistreated me, we could use it to knock some sense into him. How prophetic those words proved, though the coral tree became Father's lifeline instead of Matthew's punishment. For 3 years it had remained in storage, its beauty undiminished. I estimated it would fetch 3,000 silver pieces, enough for Father's needs with some remaining. What a lovely coral tree, Eleanor exclaimed. Where are you moving it? Let me help. That is unnecessary. I quickly instructed the servants to keep Eleanor away, but she moved too swiftly. Being Matthew's precious darling, the staff dared not use force against her. She easily reached the coral tree, and with casual curiosity, touched one of its branches. It snapped. The world went dark before my eyes. I snatched the broken piece and struck Eleanor across the face with all my strength. Are you brainless as well as deaf? Matthew returned to find Eleanor sobbing in distress. He gathered her into his arms as she trembled helplessly. Brother Matthew, I didn't know. I truly didn't know. I only wanted to help Margaret. I never meant to. Matthew's experience in the Ministry of Justice had taught him to assess situations quickly. A single glance told him everything he needed to know. Yet all he could see was the handprint on Eleanor's cheek, her swollen face, her tears that seemed to pierce his very soul. It is merely a coral tree. If it is broken, so be it. Margaret Eleanor comes from a simple background. She is unfamiliar with such valuable things. You could have taught her gently instead of resorting to violence immediately. Is this the refinement of the Westmont family? I laughed bitterly and threw the contents of my teacup in his face. Are you awake now? Since when do manners require teaching that one must not touch others' belongings without permission? Matthew made no attempt to dodge the tea, his face dripping with liquid. Eleanor screamed, embracing him tearfully. Brother Matthew, this is all my fault. Please don't quarrel with Margaret because of me. Matthew patted her shoulder gently. This proud man, for her sake, was prepared to humble himself before me. Margaret Eleanor meant no harm. She simply doesn't understand. Don't make things difficult for her. I apologize on her behalf. Apologies. Such worthless offerings, what use were they to me? I stepped closer. I need no apologies from either of you. Whether she understands or not is no concern of mine. 3,000 silver pieces. Matthew, I want that money tonight, or I'll find ways to make her life very unpleasant indeed. Eleanor's surprise was impossible to hide. This represented an enormous sum. Common families spent less than 10 pieces annually. Matthew, newly appointed to his position, faced countless expenses. His pride prevented him from touching my dowry, and his official salary flowed through his fingers like water. Yet he didn't hesitate long. Wrapping his cloak around Eleanor, he left me with a single word: agreed. Leaving proved simpler than I had imagined. Pawning my dowry, hiring carriages, and managing various necessities took half a day. When I returned home, a servant waited in the courtyard. Matthew had prepared the banknotes but hadn't come personally. I counted them carefully, exactly 3,000 pieces. No more, no less. I had forgotten that Matthew was no longer the impoverished academy scholar who once bought me pearl earrings with his modest writing fees. As Deputy Minister of Justice, financial concerns no longer troubled him. After securing the money, I wrote 2 letters and went to the southeastern courtyard where Matthew was surely with Eleanor. Madam, the master is handling official business and cannot receive visitors. A servant informed me respectfully. Official business. Yet I clearly heard Eleanor's voice. The courtyard gate stood slightly ajar, and through the gap, I glimpsed that unbending man bent over Eleanor's face, tenderly applying medicine to her bruises. Eleanor wore apricot-colored robes, gazing up at him. They appeared perfectly matched. Madam," the servant stammered behind me. I forced a smile and handed her the 2 letters. "Receipts," I said. "Have Matthew sign them quickly so I can arrange for the coral tree's delivery." The servant was illiterate and didn't realize that only the top letter was a receipt. The bottom one was another divorce agreement. She delivered both to Matthew exactly as I had written them. I expected Matthew to hesitate, at least briefly. Instead, he barely glanced at them before signing carelessly, adding his seal without question. As I accepted the divorce papers, I felt an unexpected surge of relief. At 15, during the imperial banquet, I had been struck by his elegance and wit. Father had warned me that while Matthew's literary talents and integrity served the people well, such men didn't necessarily make good husbands. Young and naive, I believed I was special, that with enough obedience and understanding, I could warm his cold heart. Now, after 3 years of wasted devotion, it was finally over. Returning to my chambers, I ordered my servants to burn all the paintings Matthew had made of me over the years. "But madam, don't you treasure these pictures most?" a servant asked in confusion. Indeed, I had loved them. They say an artist's brush reveals a lover's eyes, and Matthew had painted me constantly sitting, reclining, playing with cats, feeding fish, through all 4 seasons. I had believed this meant something, that the romantic hero of every lady's dreams had become my husband, that we would share intimate mornings and harmonious evenings. But dreams end when one awakens. "There will soon be a new mistress here," I said quietly. "Best not to trouble her with such things." When the paintings were half consumed by flames, Matthew appeared. In all the time since Father's imprisonment, despite my 13 attempts to see him, he had never granted me an audience. Now, as I prepared to leave, he came, seeing his artwork burning. Matthew clearly startled. He instinctively ordered servants to bring sand and water, trying to salvage what remained. "There is no need," I said. Matthew clenched his fists, the rescued papers crumpling in his grasp. "Why, I no longer like them." He looked confused, but then noticed my packed belongings, his brow furrowing. "If you dislike them, I'll paint new ones later. But Margaret Eleanor just arrived in the capital and has no friends. Tomorrow's garden party will require proper attire and jewelry." Until today, I had never met Eleanor. We shared no close friendship that might justify sharing jewelry, nor any childhood bond. Why should I give her anything? Absolutely not. There are countless shops selling ready-made clothing and jewelry. Why must I provide for her? Matthew's expression darkened. "Because Eleanor desires them. Do you realize if not for you, she should have been able to?" The words cut off abruptly, but in that instant, I understood what he meant to say. If not for me, Eleanor should have married her childhood sweetheart. She wouldn't have suffered an unhappy marriage, could have openly enjoyed all of Matthew's achievements. She had endured so much hardship with him. Why should she be merely Miss Eleanor when he achieved success, rather than Mrs. Whitmore? I seized my jewelry box and hurled it at Matthew. The crash scattered pearl necklaces, jade bracelets, armbands, and hair ornaments across the floor. "Take them all." Matthew stared for a long moment, then knelt to gather the scattered pieces. The jade bracelet was his New Year's gift during our first year of marriage. He had placed it on my wrist during the vigil, wishing me happiness and calling it a token of good fortune. The armbands, the hair ornaments, all had been given by his own hands. Yet now he took nothing, his lips parting as though to speak before thinking better of it. He swept from the room in silence. Indeed, Matthew was selected as the top scholar at 19 young, composed, dignified, dressed in ceremonial red. He rode through the capital streets, while countless young ladies lost their hearts to him. When Father posed the riddle, "Because of lotuses, we obtain roots," he had always resented me, resented that my privileged birth had secured me a position he felt I didn't deserve, preventing him from marrying Eleanor. I had long wondered why Matthew's paintings showed only my back, and on the rare occasions he painted my profile, Ink drops always obscured my features. Only when Eleanor appeared before me did I understand Matthew's portraits of his wife had never truly been of me, they were of her. How could someone as intelligent as Matthew not realize how desperately I needed him these past weeks? I was merely a woman with no access to high officials, watching money flow away, while managing only small gestures, gifts to guards, modest comforts for father. Yet on the day father was accused, Matthew requested leave and returned to Songjiang province. Who was in Songjiang? Matthew spent a month there while his robes became soaked with Eleanor's tears. She had suffered in her marriage, and when he achieved success and married into nobility, she had tearfully wed a scholar. Matthew helped her divorce, using his position as deputy minister to pressure her husband. Meanwhile, during father's 3 months of imprisonment, he never saw me once. When I desperately needed his help, when I wanted merely to visit father once, Matthew, as deputy minister of justice, could have arranged it with a single word. Instead, he was tending to Eleanor, newly arrived and housed in the southeastern courtyard, watching over her sick bed while sending servants with messages. Eleanor is ill. I cannot leave her. I'll speak with you when time permits. I waited through that entire night in the cold wind. He never came. The 3-court mansion stretched several hundred steps from end to end, yet somehow the distance between us remained insurmountable, perhaps because Matthew had never intended to reach me. The garden party was hosted by the Minister of Justice's wife, who delighted in cultivating flowers. Her husband had set aside garden space for her hobby, and each blooming season brought invitations to the capital's distinguished ladies. Ordinarily, such gatherings would exclude someone of Eleanor's modest background. But she had asked, and Matthew busied himself preparing her attire and jewelry. He even prepared an outfit for me. Such fine Suzhou embroidery. And the colors complement Madame perfectly. The master clearly cherishes you. Please try it on. I smiled and declined. Did he truly cherish me? This was merely concern that Eleanor might become a target of gossip. His tenderness toward her couldn't bear even the smallest slight. He anticipated every possible criticism. Tell your master I won't attend the garden party. The servant looked bewildered. When Matthew learned of my refusal, he came in obvious anger. Margaret, what game are you playing now? Can you not simply treat Eleanor kindly? Our eyes met, and he suddenly paused, swallowing his remaining words. Are you ill, Number Matthew? Father departs for Maizhou today. I must see him off, so I cannot attend the garden party. In his preoccupation with Eleanor, he had forgotten father's case, forgotten the departure date, forgotten his promise to accompany me. This is Eleanor's first social gathering, he said. She is nervous and needs my support. Margaret, your father can wait a little longer. After the party ends, I'll join you at the docks. With your father gone, I'll become your support. Your future and reputation will depend on me. Don't be afraid. As he spoke, he moved to embrace me. I raised my hand to stop him. A servant called from outside. Sir, time grows short. Miss Eleanor awaits. Eleanor, he murmured. I nodded. Go to her. She is waiting. Matthew seemed relieved by my understanding. Once Eleanor's matter is settled, I'll hurry to the docks, he promised. He turned and left, while I gathered my prepared belongings, loaded my remaining dowry onto a hired carriage, and departed the Whitmore house forever. During the journey through summer's Jiangnan region, father's poetic spirit soared. He praised his devoted wife, boasted of his filial daughter, and thoroughly cursed Matthew. That ungrateful wretch. Mother nodded vigorously. No wonder his name contains white. He is a white-eyed wolf reborn. Matthew's proud nature meant he asked favors of no one, but that didn't prevent father from secretly assisting his career. How else could one among so many struggling scholars rise so quickly in just 3 years? Unfortunately, he had proven unworthy of such kindness. I had thought father resented Matthew's refusal to help, until one evening when father had too much wine. Sitting on the boat's deck, he wept quietly. My Margaret is so good, how could anyone treat her so poorly? That little beast. Next time I'll crack his skull open. Marrying the wrong man wasn't our fault. The man was simply wrong. With my parents beside me, whether unmarried or divorced, I remained the treasured daughter of the Westmont family. I would love again, and I would always deserve love in return. 3 months later, we safely reached Maizhou, where father was appointed as an educational administrator. Before arriving, we had worried about the region's reputation: deadly miasmas, dangerous wildlife, unruly locals uninterested in scholarship. Yet Maizhou proved delightful. Though the climate was humid and insects numerous, neighbors kindly taught us pest control methods. We discovered fruits unknown in the capital, and most importantly, the local dedication to learning was extraordinary. Every 10 households supported a school. Father assumed his duties with enthusiasm, while mother and I tended our new courtyard, planting beautiful flowers and delicious fruits, creating lovely embroidery patterns. In this remote place far from the capital, our needlework gained unexpected popularity. Local ladies frequently invited us for visits under the pretense of sharing patterns, and we gradually formed friendships. They grew curious about us, initially asking politely about the capital's customs. As familiarity grew, their questions became more personal. How old is Margaret? Is she married? If so, why didn't her husband accompany her parents to Maizhou? Romance always sparked curiosity, though I hadn't fully explained Eleanor's role to my parents. I offered a simple fabrication to outsiders. When my family faced difficulties, my former husband abandoned me for someone wealthier. With nowhere else to turn, I returned to my parents. They responded with sympathy. A woman's fate often lay beyond her control, her honor tied to father and brothers on one side. Family disgrace needn't affect married daughters. Yet some cruel families would arrange their wives' and daughters' sudden deaths, while kinder ones might allow Buddhist retreat. This shared understanding made them more welcoming. Knowing father received no salary in exile, they regularly commissioned embroidery work and shared seasonal produce and winter fuel. Days passed peacefully. Spring departed, autumn returned. After attending the magistrate's youngest daughter's coming-of-age ceremony, father calculated we had been in Maizhou for 2 years. I was now 21. Father suddenly asked, "Margaret, I fear I'll spend my remaining years in Maizhou. When your mother and I are gone, what will you do?" His single question revealed his vulnerability. I looked up to see more gray in his hair than when he had taught me as a child. His back more bent than when he had seen me married. Father was aging. He feared both my encountering another unworthy man and my facing life alone. I smiled. "Then let me meet some suitors." That spring at 21, I met Christopher Chen. I was transplanting a flowering shrub that preferred shade and moisture when dizziness struck me as I stood. Christopher caught my arm as I swayed. "Nonce," I steadied. He immediately released me and stood respectfully before me, his face crimson to the neck. "I meant no impropriety, miss. I saw you about to fall and wished to help. I am a County Academy student come to request essay corrections from the master. Is he at home?" I found his earnestness amusing and pointed toward the study. "In there." "Thank you, miss." He took 2 steps, then returned to stand before me. "Miss, my surname is Chen, Christopher Chen." Initially, I paid little attention to Christopher. His name suggested rustic origins, and at 18 he was 3 years my junior. Yet he proved dedicated to learning, visiting frequently, and possessed remarkable strength and patience with gardening. He knew which flowers bloomed, whether they preferred sun or shade, moisture or dryness. Even an orchid I had failed to cultivate thrived under his care. I teased him, "Little flower god." Christopher's face reddened again. "Please, just call me Christopher, or Chris if you prefer." Given his youth, I adopted Chris, while his address to me evolved from Miss to Margaret. One day he arrived as father was introducing a young man as a potential suitor. The usually bashful youth suddenly showed tears. "Margaret, I want to marry you. I'd even join your household as son-in-law." I immediately refused. I had no interest in young men seeking to advance through marriage. "Chris, perhaps you don't know I've been divorced. I understand what marriage entails. Meeting suitors doesn't indicate desperation for a husband or support. I simply wish to reassure my parents. Christopher focused on the essential point. So you won't marry him, correct? With my parents' encouragement, I had met numerous potential matches over 6 months. None had succeeded. Men seemed peculiar creatures secretly hoping to benefit from my father's reputation while maintaining pretenses of nobility, boasting of modest talents while revealing underlying ambition. Learning of father's permanent exile, they became condescending. How exhausting. Christopher brightened at my words, presenting a flowering sapling he had brought. May I continue helping with your garden? Continue? I struggled with the propriety of encouraging a rejected suitor, yet his horticultural skills were undeniable. Seeing Christopher's sincere, ardent gaze, lies seemed particularly cruel. The young man towered over me, and in his eyes I saw my own reflection. Chris, you'll eventually marry. Your wife won't appreciate your tending another woman's garden. You should, Christopher interrupted with a mischievous smile. Not necessarily. I neither accepted nor firmly refused Christopher. He seemed undeterred, continuing his visits to consult father and assist with gardening, occasionally inquiring about my suitors and privately criticizing them. During the next imperial examinations, several candidates from distant provinces set fire to themselves in a dramatic protest, having discovered that answers had been sold to wealthy families who sent substitutes to claim advanced degrees. This wasn't their first such offense. The case's scope prompted the emperor to reinvestigate the earlier examination fraud accusations. Father was vindicated. Father had reconciled himself to lifelong exile in Meizhou. The news left him bewildered. After 3 years, we had grown fond of local customs, their soups, the humid climate that nurtured our flourishing gardens. Yet, with imperial messengers coming to escort us home, farewell was inevitable. Christopher had composed himself before our meeting. Standing in my small garden, he discussed which plants might survive transplantation to the capital, and which should remain for his continued care. Watching him, I asked a foolish question. Chris, won't you ask if I'd consider staying? Ah. Christopher had never contemplated such a thing. Kneeling among the flowers, he smiled. That is unnecessary. He didn't ask me to stay. He would come to the capital instead. As I prepared to respond, a familiar voice called behind me, Margaret. I turned genuinely surprised. I had never expected Matthew to seek me out. Shouldn't such a man have laughed at my departure as foolish ingratitude, then embraced Eleanor and declared my leaving irrelevant before proceeding with their happy marriage? Only when he strode forward and grasped my wrist, pulling me away from Christopher, did I fully comprehend his presence. I withdrew my hand and offered a proper curtsy. Minister Whitmore. Distance makes strangers of the most intimate couples. After 3 years, Matthew had changed considerably. No longer aloof and unapproachable, he seemed like cold tea, more complex and clouded. Political disappointments and struggles had presumably refined him through adversity. Yet this no longer concerned me. I indicated the path. Father is in his study. Turning to Christopher, I began introductions. This is Minister Whitmore from the capital here to see Father. You mentioned earlier, Matthew interrupted. Margaret, your father already has an imperial messenger. I came for you. 3 years ago, I waited at the docks all night, but you left the capital without notice. Only then did I discover you had deceived me into signing divorce papers. The divorce was never my intention. I found his words absurd. Matthew, don't you find such statements ridiculous? You claim it was about Eleanor? You knew I was orphaned young and raised by her father's kindness. After his death, I bore responsibility for her. Simply because I was caring for Eleanor when your father faced trouble, you divorced me. What justice is this? I met Matthew's gaze calmly. Yes, you had obligations. Because Eleanor was your childhood love. Because her father showed you kindness. Everything concerning her took precedence over me, over my father. When father was falsely accused, you abandoned me to rescue a woman unhappy in her marriage. When I desperately needed help, you tended her adjustment sickness while I waited alone through the night. You constantly demanded my accommodation simply because I married you, as though that made me naturally inferior to her. Yet why should I yield, Matthew? I owe you nothing, and I certainly owe her nothing. During 3 years in Maizhou, I had reached clarity on many issues. Previously, I had resented Eleanor for interfering in my marriage, for her convenient crises coinciding with father's troubles, for her constant priority in Matthew's considerations. Later, I realized my resentment was misdirected. I should have blamed Matthew. Without his repeated encouragement, Eleanor wouldn't have feared losing him so desperately or regretted her marriage to another. He had fed her impossible dreams. Matthew's face went ashen, his lips parting as though to explain. Margaret, I regarded her only as a sister, nothing more than brotherly protection. I came to bring you home. 3 years ago, you resented my abandonment of your father. This time, I personally ensured his vindication. Could you return to my side? Could we begin anew? I laughed aloud. Matthew, clearing father's name was your duty as deputy minister, not a personal favor to me. If you are truly confused, consider me your sister as well. I'll never marry you again. My smile contained no emotion whatsoever. Releasing someone completely felt like this, neither joy nor sorrow, not even hatred. He became like any random stranger on the street. I turned to instruct Christopher about tomorrow's flower transplanting. Behind me came a barely audible whisper. I am sorry. Matthew's arrival created ripples throughout Maizhou's official circles. Though many sought information about him, Christopher was not among them. He helped me organize seedlings, more silent than usual. I restrained myself from speaking. Finally, he broke. Margaret, do you think me useless? Matthew was so accomplished, a renowned scholar who had achieved the highest examination honors. Everyone praised his marriage to me as ideal. Perhaps that was why I had never accepted Christopher's proposal, why I couldn't ask another to wait 3 years for me. In the moonlight, Christopher seemed endearingly vulnerable. I approached him, rose on my toes, and kissed his forehead. Of course not. Someone who loves you will find everything about you wonderful. Unknown to me, Matthew had witnessed this entire scene. Before he could speak, I said, Matthew, you have no right to control me or dictate my life. Consider whether I wish to hear your words before speaking. His lips pressed together. Margaret, is there truly no possibility for us? None. Matthew smiled bitterly. You never treated me this way before. I thought long before understanding perhaps he referred to kissing him as I had Christopher. There had been such moments. Many times I had wanted to rush into his arms, to stand on tiptoe, and kiss his chin, to act coquettishly. But in those early days when Matthew was newly appointed to the academy, he would coldly push me away. None of that mattered now, did I not? Then I wish you happiness with someone more compatible. Excuse me. I lost patience, stepping around Matthew as he once had around me, leaving him with only my departing figure. Father chose an auspicious date for our return to the capital. Our journey from the capital to Maizhou had required only 3 or 5 trunks traveling light. Our return voyage filled an entire boat with countless boxes. Fortunately, our confiscated mansion had been restored upon Father's vindication. Father had written old friends requesting they maintain the property. Upon our arrival, everything awaited us, including my maiden chamber preserved exactly as before my marriage. Standing in the courtyard felt wonderful. After our return, social invitations flooded in like snowflakes. Though I declined them all, I needed to tend my transported plants. Father had specifically instructed his friends to preserve garden space for me. Plants from Maizhou faced entirely different climate and soil conditions in the capital. Immediate transplanting would be fatal. Soil inspection came first, followed by careful preparation. The long, vacant courtyard had degraded earth, requiring loosening, replacement, and nourishment for several days. This involved complex soil treatment. After nearly half a month of intensive work, I finally had leisure to accept a social invitation, coincidentally from the Minister of Justice's family. For the occasion, I brought a beautiful gladiolus. The minister's wife's eyes lit up with delight. Oh my, such a difficult flower to cultivate, yet you've made it flourish. I have an orchid blooming, please advise me. Following her to examine her flowers, I listened to her comments about Matthew. I learned then that during my mist garden party 3 years prior, Matthew had accompanied Eleanor, though Eleanor found little acceptance among the ladies. Her humble background left her with nothing to contribute to their conversations. Though introduced as Matthew's relative, she clearly wasn't his wife. Eleanor had repeatedly sought Matthew's assistance that day, but Matthew had apparently heard disturbing news and overturned a teacup. Instead of helping Eleanor, he entrusted her to servants and rode off at full gallop. Minister Whitmore searched for you at the docks all night. Only upon seeing his signed divorce papers did he believe you had truly left. He fell seriously ill, missing 2 weeks of court attendance. They say he intended to follow you, but that sister of his made terrible scenes, demanding marriage. He declared that Margaret Westmont would be his only wife, he would never remarry. Clearly, you hold a place in his heart. The Justice Minister was Matthew's superior. Naturally, his wife would speak favorably of him. I didn't argue, merely smiled. Madam, your orchid suffers from root rot. Water it less frequently. Once roots rot, even divine intervention cannot save it. On my way home from this gathering, Eleanor intercepted my carriage. She appeared unwell, not in terms of material comfort, as Matthew never stinted on others' needs, but her complexion was poor, her expression troubled. She looked like someone life had not treated kindly. Miss Westmont, may I speak with you briefly? Just a few words. I felt we had nothing to discuss. Without Matthew's connection, our lives would never have intersected. That is unnecessary. I have no interest in your affairs. Yet Eleanor spread her arms to block the carriage, running alongside and grasping the window frame as large tears fell. But I truly don't know what to do anymore. Miss Westmont, except for you, I know no one in the capital. I have so much to say, but no one to tell. I think I might die soon. I lie awake every night, and in dreams I always see you. Since you left, Brother Matthew refuses to see me. I really don't know what to do. Eleanor spoke incoherently. I reflected that she was, after all, merely a 20-year-old girl from the provinces in an overwhelming capital. Like a drowning person, Matthew was her only remaining lifeline. Seeing my stillness, she continued, actually, those past actions weren't my true intentions. I was simply too frightened. I could only act that way because I feared Brother Matthew might stop loving me, might abandon me too. I am sorry, so sorry. I was wrong before. Sister, please teach me what should I do. I handed her a handkerchief. If you are asking how to make Matthew marry you, I don't know. But if you are willing to hear alternatives, consider visiting Prosperity Street. Life is brief, no need to bind yourself entirely to one man. Eleanor paused, lowering her arms. The carriage rolled past her as I glimpsed her through the curtains, crouched small and alone, arms wrapped around herself. Much later, I encountered Eleanor again. By then, she had opened a confectionery shop on Prosperity Street, specializing in Songjiang sugar candies, along with other provincial delicacies. Running a food business was demanding work, yet Eleanor seemed capable and willing. She bustled about busily, but her face carried genuine contentment. That day she didn't notice me as I sent someone to purchase a plate of candies. Those sweets I had missed years before, they tasted sweet, like our lives. After Father's return, he could be said to enjoy imperial favor and rapid advancement. Though exile had diminished his ambition for high office, his only calculated political move was arranging Matthew's promotion to distant Yuanzhou prefecture. The assignment was far from the capital without achieving significant governance there. Matthew could never expect to return. Matthew accepted this without complaint. Before departing, he returned my coral tree, saying it had always been part of my dowry, and now belonged to its rightful owner. Through some unknown method, he had repaired the break where Eleanor had snapped it, making it appear whole from a distance, though close inspection revealed the crack. Father stood before the coral tree with hands clasped behind his back, sighing, "Do you regret it?" "Number. I regret it. If I'd known, I should have cracked his skull before he left. Now it is too late." I linked arms with Father, laughing. Too late was fine. The right person would arrive at the perfect moment. Another round of imperial examinations approached. Father wisely declined to serve as examiner. I tended my garden flowers, awaiting the young man who had promised to meet our 3-year agreement. From the distance came sounds of commotion. Looking up, I saw the youth had become a man, running toward me with his long shadow trailing behind. "I am here, Margaret." Epilogue, Matthew's perspective. Matthew Whitmore experienced the full rise and fall of official life. At 19, he achieved highest examination honors. At 26 was posted to Yuanzhou, beginning as magistrate and advancing through prefect to provincial governor. His achievements were remarkable. When he returned to the capital at 40, his appearance retained youthful elegance while his bearing suggested deep wisdom. Yet not even a single woman served in his household. Former Justice Minister Harrison found him for drinks, asking, still thinking of her, what made her so special? Was she truly irreplaceable? They both knew whom he meant in his most desperate year. Matthew had even asked Harrison's wife to intercede. Yes, Matthew's response came without hesitation. He had once failed to understand Margaret's appeal. At their marriage's beginning, she possessed many qualities he found objectionable. Indeed, her privileged background had shielded her from hardship, fostering a pampered temperament. She smiled frequently, but what in life warranted such constant joy? Was it merely her father's position? Their marriage had been misaligned from the start. Matthew gazed up at her from below. An insurmountable chasm separated them. Though he tried to love her properly, he couldn't overcome the bitterness in his heart where wild horses trampled, each one crying. Why her? Why did she possess such advantages? Why could she easily obtain what he struggled so long to even glimpse? Matthew, so strange and unlikable, deliberately caused pain he knew would hurt her. Yes, it was intentional. In his baseness, he wanted to drag her from her pedestal. She would no longer be an elevated noble lady, but as lowly as himself, her life's honor dependent entirely on him. So when her father was imprisoned, Matthew's first reaction was satisfaction. Her support was gone. He immediately brought Eleanor back, perfectly avoiding Margaret and letting her suffer, letting her temperament be tempered. He wanted her to learn humility. He believed he had been forced by circumstances to marry Margaret, while Eleanor was his true childhood companion. He desperately compensated Eleanor, justifying it as gratitude. But deeper reasons existed. Eleanor and he were alike, forever unable to lift their heads before Margaret. Yet everything spiraled beyond his control. Margaret abandoned him without a backward glance. He hadn't wanted her submission, he had wanted her love. Matthew had mistaken submission for love. He recalled their newlywed period's genuine affection. Her back was narrow and delicate. She enjoyed experimenting with unusual recipes in the small kitchen, while he leaned against the doorframe, smiling as he watched her. Those had been life's finest moments. Later, as Matthew's position rose, all women gazed up at him like Eleanor. But he felt no attraction, only distaste. He couldn't release Margaret, even after leaving the capital, continuing to seek news of her. He learned she had married Christopher Chen. He knew Christopher was merely a minor scholar with no political ambitions. The couple shared a love of gardening and travel, somehow producing the Extraordinary Flowers Chronicle. The book meticulously documented each flower appearance, blooming season, characteristics, cultivation methods. Upon receiving the book, one phrase echoed in Matthew's mind: she was well. Only she would never belong to him again. His heart remained permanently hollow, an unfillable void. From the distance came the celebratory sound of gongs and drums, someone's wedding procession. The groom rode a decorated horse, beaming with joy. If life could begin again.